Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. So, we're going to talk about math and Final Fantasy, specifically math and Final Fantasy 1, the original Final Fantasy. So, I'm going to talk about the gameplay mostly, um, but also talk about my thoughts on the story by the end of it, and just math in a more meta context as well. And yeah, just I'm just also just gonna be talking about Final Fantasy in general. Um, but as far as spoilers go, you can assume yes for the first game, but I don't think it ruins anything. Like the story was not the focus, and that was intentional, but it does exist, and it does contain at least one crazy twist at the end. So yeah, you're free to assume spoilers ahead for Final Fantasy One, because I'm going to be talking about Final Fantasy overall, but I'll be sticking to the story stuff for just Final Fantasy One. Um, so yeah, let's talk about some Final Fantasy. So as far as that original Final Fantasy goes, um, it's honestly pretty solid. Just from the jump, right? Like at that point, there were other RPGs in video game form, both how you're probably thinking, but also like text-based ones, and also we had tabletop RPGs. So there was a lot to pull from. But Final Fantasy still did its thing. And for the record, it debuted the same year I was born, 87 for context, 1987. And with the basic gameplay, I'm going to talk about it on a really basic level, like right to the actual point in what you're doing, but then kind of expand that and talk about how that shows up in Final Fantasy. Um, so, the basic idea, like at its core, is inherently mathematical. It's that idea that, you know, you have your health, your opponent, they have their health. You are trying to dish out damage and take their health from 100% to zero. They're trying to do the same to you. You're trying to dish out damage while trying to avoid taking it. Um, or, you know, if you do take it, you want to be able to either nullify it or recover from it. And there are multiple ways to do that. And so that's the core, right? But how does that show up? So in Final Fantasy, it shows up like this. You have your characters. Uh, they have their levels and their stats at those different levels, and those stats increase as they go on, right? You gain experience, they gain experiences, you're gaining experience by fighting different opponents, and you're leveling up. And with those characters, they have different jobs, classes, whatever you want to call them. And with these different jobs, they have different ways that their stats show up, right? Because you might have like characters um, like the fighter, warrior, later on, like classes like that, where they're harder to hit, right? Or rather, they can take a hit and they can dish out some solid like physical damage. But then you might have a mage character be able to dish out some devastating magic, and so they have these different jobs with different benefits stat wise, different abilities that you could use during battle, and you're managing that. Um, and while you're managing what you're doing in battle on that base level, you're also accruing items that you can use in battle as well. And so you're practicing resource management in and out of battle, and that idea of fighting and using items at the same time. And it might not sound like much to some people, but it's like it's math in action, and it ends up building the core of the game. And even though like a lot of Final Fantasy games have different combat systems, at its core, there's that idea of dishing out damage and trying to not take it, and all the things that surround that, while practicing resource management and leveling up in some form or another. And so you see things pretty refined, I think, in Final Fantasy One, Final Fantasy, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's pretty cool, right? Because like you're doing that idea like it's turn-based combat for that first one, and for several of them, and I just like how that shows up. And there's so much that you can do and customize, like even within that one. But the idea is like you have four characters that you're playing is it's kind of a weird and interesting situation because it's like they're all the silent protagonists pretty much. Like they don't really interact with each other in a meaningful way. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, that was intentional. To pull you like into the game and stuff like that. It's like it's not always my favorite thing, but it's like so they had an idea of what they wanted to do, and that did change. His story became so important for these games. That's not to say this game doesn't have a story because it does, and but with that in mind, I want to say a few more things because like okay, in battle you have like some characters can use magic, some can't, right? Like the black mage can use destructive magic. The white mage could use curative magic. Something like warrior class, they are. I was gonna say good at fighting, and that's true, but it's like I wanted to say more of that, right? Like they can dish out damage, more damage than those other characters could, while also taking damage better, but they can't use magic. And like something with a thief, they have special abilities, but they also can't use magic. And that's just for like this first Final Fantasy because you see different things changing in different games. I mean, there's a more eloquent way to say everything I just said. But my whole point is like you have these different characters using different abilities, and the idea is the same, right? Like trying to defeat your opponent, and as you're defeating them, you're gaining more experience, and you're able to get more powerful and navigate the world better, right? So it's really cool because the gameplay is not only fun, but it's crucial to actually develop a story. Like you're getting all these experience points, you're leveling up, and as you're progressing in that gameplay sense, you know, the combat and the exploration, you're navigating the world, right? You're getting to progress through the story, and I think that's cool. And this game it's formed the basis for so many other Final Fantasy games and has inspired so many other games. And I think that's pretty cool. And just from the jump, the music was already good. And I like that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the story. And like I said in the beginning, spoilers. So there's actually not like a lot going on in the story. It's like it's to the point, right? It's not bad. It's there, but it won't necessarily blow your mind. You play as the four warriors of light, and the crystals that power like pretty much the world. Right? They've all gone dark, and you have to bring light back to them and save the world from evil forces. And so that's pretty much it. Like seriously, you do meet different characters on the way, but they're not the focal point. And that was a choice, not a bad choice, just a choice. And I think that's interesting. And by the end of it, I think the end stands out to me because again, like spoilers ahead, but it's like there's a knight that goes evil named Garland at the beginning of the game. He just kind of goes crazy, and you have to like destroy him pretty early on, and so you do. But it turns out that was part of a whole time loop situation, and he eventually ends up going back in time and becoming chaos, or was it that he sends himself in? Well, no, I guess that was the whole loop thing, right? Like he gets defeated, goes back, it gets sent back in time somehow, only to become chaos, and chaos sends himself in the future. Am I remembering that right? I feel like I am, but my whole thing is like it was unexpected, like because I already heard already that Garland becomes chaos, but it's like so that part wasn't super shocking because it had already been spoiled for me. But it's just like the time travel part was kind of crazy, and that the four warriors of light were caught into a time loop until they break it in this game. And what's different? Literally you, the player. So there's like a fourth wall moment where they indicate as much. So it's like on a meta level, you already know, but like they actually worked that into the story, which is kind of like crazy. Also, I wanted to say like if you were playing Final Fantasy with the pixel remasters, you can control the rate at which you gain experience and money. You can turn encounters on and off at will, so you can customize those sort of things. And it's like because right there's always a lot of grinding and there's a lot of random encounters, and so it's like you can choose how you want to handle that, right? Because you can make things really hard on yourself, or you can make them less grindy. Like you're still gonna grind, but not as much. So it's up to you how you want to customize that. But regardless of how you put it, or regardless of what you do, that's math. Don't know why it did that, but that's where we are at. So yeah, Final Fantasy. It is good, and it kicked up an entire series. Right, it started a monster, and I'm here for it.